Okay, let's dive into an explainer today that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Seriously, it's got that kind of tension. But everything we're about to cover is entirely grounded in the harsh reality of systemic abuse and one official's absolutely extraordinary resilience. We're looking at an incredible real-life sting operation where a high-ranking authority decided to step completely out of her bubble, drop her title, and experience the system exactly as a powerless, everyday citizen would.
But before we get into the action, to really understand the sheer scale of the institutional rot we're talking about, we first have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. What actually happens to the voiceless when they're targeted by the very people sworn to protect them? Well, usually, that story ends in injustice, right? The citizen is bullied, extorted, or even worse, and the corrupt officials just move right along to their next target without a second thought. But what happens when those same corrupt officials accidentally target the one person who holds the power to completely destroy their entire criminal enterprise?
So, picture this. Our narrative begins really intimately on a dusty road near the town of Hassanabad. A 28-year-old woman named Barnali Singh is just riding her motorcycle. She's got no government vehicle, no security detail, and she's dressed super simply, literally just heading out to a friend's wedding. But up ahead of her is a police checkpost. She's stopped by local police under the command of a guy named Inspector Prosenjit. He raises his stick, signals her to stop, and immediately, just immediately, begins mocking her. He demands to know why she isn't wearing a helmet, falsely accuses her of speeding, and is very clearly laying the groundwork to extort a bride.
And things escalate fast. You have Inspector Prosenjit's loud, violent arrogance on full display. When Barnali politely but firmly states that she hasn't broken any laws, the inspector just snaps. He violently slaps her across the face. Then a constable steps forward, actually grabs her by the hair and drags her toward a police vehicle, while another officer completely smashes her motorcycle with a stick. It's brutal. But in the face of all this absolute chaos, Barnali maintains the stoic, calculating silence. Despite the physical assault, despite the pain, she sheds no tears. She doesn't scream. She just watches them.
Now, you'd think her totally calm reaction would be a huge red flag for them, right? Nope. Prosenjit just digs his own grave even deeper. He barks at her, "Don't teach us the law," and then literally orders his men to teach her a lesson. The guy is just so consumed by his own ego and power, he is completely unaware that he's stepping right into a massive, inescapable trap. He orders his men to drag her to the police station to break her spirit, assuming she's just another helpless citizen he can crush.
The crazy thing is, at any given moment, Barnali could have ended this whole nightmare instantly just by stating her name. But she doesn't. She deploys what we can call strategic silence. It was a deliberate, incredibly brave choice to experience exactly what an ordinary, powerless citizen faces. She wanted to document just how low this specific department would sink. Basically, by withholding her identity, she turned herself into a mirror, forcing this corrupt system to fully expose its ugliest, truest reflection.
Once they get her to the police station, the escalation is just terrifying. Prosenjit rapidly starts piling on these fake charges. I mean, it started with that fabricated speeding excuse, right? Then it moved to resisting authority. And then, as he's sitting right there at his desk, he arbitrarily orders his men to slap charges of theft, blackmail, and Section 420, which is fraud, onto her file. The whole shebang. All of this was simply to punish her for not immediately bowing down to his illegal shakedown.
And this next part is just wild. It really illustrates the horrific reality of that precinct. When a somewhat hesitant constable actually questions the inspector, asking how they could possibly charge her with theft and fraud when they don't have any evidence, Prosenjit literally laughs. He boasts out loud, "Evidence isn't brought to this station, it's made here." He said this right in front of Barnali, proudly confessing to manufacturing evidence while she is secretly documenting every single word in her head. After giving them the fake name Sumita Sharma, Barnali is thrown into a foul, rotting general holding cell with a bunch of other inmates. But then, there's a slight shift in the dynamic. Senior Inspector Sanjay Varma arrives on the scene. Now, he's got a slightly better reputation, and he immediately notices her unusual, totally fearless demeanor. Suspecting foul play, he asks Prosenjit what's going on. Prosenjit just brushes her off as some arrogant street woman, but Varma isn't buying it. He orders her moved to a solitary, decrepit cell just to isolate the situation and decides to stay close by. The systemic abuse is definitely continuing, but you can see a tiny crack starting to form. Then, we hit the absolute turning point of the entire explainer. A panicked constable suddenly rushes into the room, out of breath, announcing that a government vehicle has just pulled up outside. It's the commissioner. The sudden arrival sends this massive, immediate wave of panic through the previously arrogant officers. The whole dynamic in the room flips in a second.
These predators suddenly realize a much bigger force has just entered the building.
So the commissioner walks in and he is clearly furious. He demands to know what on earth is happening. He picks up the file, sees these incredibly serious charges of Section 420 and fraud, and looks directly at this battered woman sitting in the holding cell. He corners Prosenjit about the absolute lack of evidence for these massive charges, and Prosenjit just freezes. He has nothing. Then the commissioner looks back at the silent prisoner and simply asks, "What is your name?"
And right here, after hours of being mocked, slapped, dragged by her hair, and thrown into a rotting holding cell, the woman finally breaks her strategic silence. With just a slight smile, she speaks her true name and title, Subdivisional Officer Barnali Singh.
The impact of those 3 words was literally like a bomb going off in that room. Absolute silence, and this paralyzing, sheer panic immediately gripped the entire police station. You can imagine the blood just draining from Inspector Prosenjit's face. The constables are staring at each other in total horror, because the woman they had just dragged through the dirt, physically assaulted, and framed with totally fake crimes, she was the very administrative authority in charge of their entire district. She was, quite literally, their boss.
And the way this administrative justice plays out is just incredible. It unfolds minute by minute. In minute 1, Barnali calmly declares that Prosenjit is suspended on the spot and will face criminal charges. Minute 2, a desperate Prosenjit tries to use a legal loophole. He pulls out a 3-day-old transfer order from his pocket, gets this little smirk, and claims she can't fire him because, technically, he doesn't work there anymore. But Barnali's meticulous understanding of administrative law slams the trap completely shut. By minute 3, Verma checks the computer records, and by minute 4, he confirms that, while the transfer was real, Prosenjit never officially handed over his charge. That meant he was still the commanding officer and fully, legally culpable for every single crime committed that day. Realizing that he is completely doomed and that his clever little loophole totally failed, Prosenjit absolutely panics. As the constables move in to actually arrest him, he desperately tries to drag everyone else down with him. He points at the other officers and frantically shouts, "I am not alone. It goes all the way to the top." In his cowardice, he confirms exactly what Barnali had suspected all along, right? This rot wasn't just a few bad apples, it was a deeply entrenched institutional network. By now, the media outside had caught wind of the chaos. The climax reaches the very top of the local food chain when the superintendent of police, the SP, arrives on the scene. He storms in, fully expecting to squash the media leak and take command of the room. But Senior Inspector of Arma, clearly reading the room and choosing the right side of history here, hands SDO Barnali Singh a secret file. And this file? It documents the SP's own systemic dark crimes. Barnali walks right up to the SP, hands him the file of his own corruption, and the commissioner orders the SP's immediate arrest right there on the spot. Over 40. That number represents the unbelievable fallout of this entire sting operation. Because once the local SP was arrested, that shockwave went all the way to Delhi. The chief minister was alerted, and within just 2 days, a massive wave of arrests swept through the district. More than 40 police officers, 10 senior officials, and even several heavily connected political leaders were arrested. The entire corrupt ecosystem of the district just collapsed like a giant house of cards. SDO Barnali Singh's incredible undercover endurance didn't just punish one arrogant cop. It completely purged the Hassanabad administration of its criminal elements. The corrupt local network was entirely dismantled. It instilled a brand new standard of fear in corrupt officials who suddenly woke up and realized they could no longer act with total impunity. But most importantly, it provided undeniable proof that a single honest official, armed with rock-solid integrity and unbelievable patience, can trigger massive systemic change.
Which leaves us with this final, really vital thought to reflect on as we wrap up. Barnali Singh endured physical pain, humiliation, and terror, all while holding her silence, just to expose the truth of a broken system. So, if one person's unshakable silence and strategic patience can dismantle an entire corrupt network and purge a city's administration, what kind of systemic change can our own integrity spark in our own communities? It's a pretty powerful reminder that sometimes the absolute loudest way to demand justice is to simply let the corrupt speak for themselves.